So then the non-apprehension of the self is the thing that we are trying to remove. So we need a way to approach this idea of non-apprehension of self so that we get some sort of understanding of what it means. In verse 4 he says, Atman, self, seems limited because of ignorance. When ignorance is destroyed, verily, Atman alone shines by itself like the sun when the cloud passes. So here's our next analogy. A cloud blocking the sun. So again, draw the parallels between the components of the analogy and the components of the philosophical theme. The cloud refers to ignorance, our non-apprehension of the self. The sun in this example refers to our essential being, to stay with that phrase from verse 3, the self. And again, you'll see here that these words are capitalized, B and S. So what's it saying then? He says, the Atman, the self, seems limited. So one of the things we can do is to say, well, what is the evidence of this? We're saying subjectively we feel limited and constrained. Is there any evidence that supports this claim? Ask yourself the question, why have I chosen any course of action? Why have I adopted any course through life? We'll keep coming back to the same idea over and over. It's because I feel that once I have completed the action and achieved the fruit, I will feel an enhanced sense of well-being. So the implication then is that my sense of well-being at the moment is limited and constrained. I'm hungry. I'm lonely. I lack renown and reputation. I lack moral clarity. I lack spiritual growth. So what this is saying here is that the reason we feel this sense of constraint and limitation is because we have lost sight of, or lost apprehension of, our essential self. When we know who and what we are, that sense of being limited and constrained is eradicated. Not just diminished, eradicated. It's a different kind of experience, not a different degree of experience. The analogy that we often use is the distinction between the dream state and the waking state. While I am in the dream, I am always going to be constrained in one particular way. No matter what we get in the dream, no matter how good the thing is that we get, we will not apprehend the waking state of consciousness. We will not apprehend our waking personality that is unavailable to us. Take the same idea, apply it to the waking state of consciousness. Here I am, no matter how good things get in this waking state, in my waking life. I have a beautiful life. I'll always have a nagging sense of incompleteness because I have not apprehended my essential being. Let's have a read a little more closely. He says the self seems limited. So the idea there is that our essential self is, of course, unconditioned, unconstrained, unlimited. So the word seems is the most important word here. It's the most active word. Let's stay with the analogy that he's drawing in the text. You look up to the sky and you see a cloud covering the sun. And you say the cloud has blocked the sun out. Has the cloud blocked the sun? Only to the one who has that specific location on the planet at that specific time. To a person standing 100 kilometers to my east, the cloud has not blocked the sun. So that's only true for a specific individual at a specific time and place. It's not universally true. Another analogy he's used is to say, take your little finger, place it in front of your eye. My fingernail can block out the entire world. Okay, nothing has been blocked out. In the same way, the self, which appears to me to be constrained, is not constrained. So the analogy he can draw even further, so he continues to describe it. When you look at the relationship between a sun and a cloud, what is the relationship? How are clouds formed? Well, we know that the sunlight strikes moisture. That moisture evaporates up to the higher levels of the atmosphere and creates a cloud. So the sun then is the cause of the cloud. So how does this relate to the philosophical idea? If a thing exists, then by virtue of its existence, it is possible that I do not see it as it is. So the famous example that is used all through these texts is the analogy of the rope and the snake. The rope exists. It's sitting in my backyard. By virtue of its existence, I may then not see it as a rope. Instead, I see it as a snake. So the non-apprehension gives rise to the misapprehension of the snake. So what is it that enables the rope to be not apprehended? It's the very existence of the rope. The possibility of non-apprehension of something arises only with the existence of that thing. So too, the existence of the self permits or gives rise to its potential non-apprehension. And then we take that further into a misapprehension of this limited, constrained individual and the waking world that I experience. So the existence of my essential being gives rise to the possibility of not apprehending myself as my capital S self. As a consequence, I apprehend myself as a limited, constrained individual. He continues to draw out the analogy. He goes further and says that in order for me to declare there is no sun, there must be a sun. So the thing that makes me see the cloud and recognize that there is no sun behind it is the activity of the sun. In the same way, all subjective experience requires a subject, the self. So if you look at the final paragraph of the commentary, verse 4, so he says, when a person denies the existence of the self, that is a subjective experience. In order for that person to have that subjective experience, there must be an underlying subject. There must be an essential component of my personality which is present, which gives rise to all of the expressions of my personality. What is the source of my subjective experiences? What is the source of my thoughts? Well, as we keep on answering this question the same way, I don't know. I must investigate. What does he say in the invocation? I contemplate in the early morning hours upon that self. The reason I contemplate upon it is because I don't know it. What is the source of my experience? What is the fundamental aspect of my being? Let me contemplate upon that. These analogies and these analyses help to give us an impression or a picture of what that is like. And finally, the last aspect of this particular verse, he says, when ignorance is destroyed, verily Atman alone shines by itself like the sun when the cloud passes. So once that cloud has passed, which means the ignorance has been destroyed, you don't need that cloud anymore in order to say the sun has been revealed. In the same way, he uses this phrase self-effulgent. So the Atman, your essential being, self, God, consciousness, all of these words are synonyms, is self-effulgent. What does this mean? So self-effulgent, like the sun. The sun is seen by itself. If I'm in a dark room and I have an object in front of me, I need a light in order to make that object known. But I don't need anything external to see the sun. The sun is immediately known by itself. In the same way, the essential being, the core of my personality, does not require any of these non-essential aspects in order to be known. This is simply another way of saying that my essential self transcends the body, mind, and intellect. We can't perceive our essential being, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. We can't grasp it through action, as we covered in the previous verses. We can't feel the self. You can't grasp it with the intellect. You can't understand what it is. So again, when we're trying to understand this very abstruse idea, go back to the dreamer-waker example. The dreamer has a dream body. It has dream emotions and dream thoughts. None of the personality of the dreamer is necessary in order to know that you are awake. You don't mediate your knowledge of the waking state through anything. It is the waker who directly and intuitively knows him or herself to be awake. It's immediate, non-mediated. It's intuitive. It's not something we arrive at via conclusion. The knowledge of myself as a waker is direct and intuitive to me as the waker. I don't need anything outside the waking state of consciousness. No physical, emotional, or intellectual experience can reach the self. It transcends all of these. It does not require any of these in order to be apprehended.